In this episode, we're going to talk about how intelligence moves between people, teams, and organizations, and why the format of that movement can either amplify value or quietly destroy it. When beginners hear about intelligence standards, it can sound like paperwork that only matters to large enterprises. The truth is that standards exist because humans are inconsistent and tools are inconsistent, and intelligence is most useful when it can be shared without losing meaning. If you exchange intelligence in a way that depends on one person's wording or one team's preferred template, it becomes hard to automate, hard to audit, and hard to reuse later. Standards that travel are formats and conventions that allow intelligence to be understood and acted on across different systems and different partners, even when the recipients do not know your internal jargon. This matters because threat activity often affects multiple organizations and because defenders need speed when patterns repeat. The goal here is to understand what intelligence exchange standards are trying to accomplish and how to use them without turning your work into a rigid checklist. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. The first idea is that intelligence exchange includes multiple kinds of information, and different kinds need different kinds of structure. Sometimes you are exchanging indicators, like suspicious domains, addresses, file hashes, or other observable artifacts. Sometimes you are exchanging higher-level behavior information, like techniques, targeting patterns, or campaign characteristics. Sometimes you are exchanging contextual information, like confidence, source reliability, and handling restrictions. If you exchange only indicators without context, you risk recipients blocking the wrong thing or trusting fragile information too much. If you exchange only narratives without structure, you force recipients to manually translate your text into detections and searches. Standards aim to capture both structure and context in a consistent way so that recipients can ingest, understand, and apply intelligence quickly. This is why standards are not just about data fields, but also about meaning, such as what confidence means or what a relationship between events implies. When the structure and meaning are shared, intelligence can travel farther without being distorted. A common beginner misunderstanding is thinking that a standard is just a file format, like a particular kind of document, but the deeper purpose is interoperability. Interoperability means that one team can produce intelligence and another team can consume it using different tools and still get the same core meaning. This matters because one organization might use a certain detection platform, another might use a different one, and a partner might have an entirely different workflow, but they still need to collaborate. If intelligence is shared only as a PDF report, it might be readable but not easily actionable at scale. If it is shared as raw data without human explanation, it might be ingestible but not understandable. Standards attempt to bridge this by representing intelligence in a structured way that still carries enough context for human judgment. In other words, standards help intelligence become both machine-friendly and human-safe. That balance is why standards that travel are worth learning. When people talk about standards for exchanging cyber threat intelligence, they often mean structured formats designed specifically for this purpose. Structured Threat Information Expression, STIX, is a common standard for representing threat intelligence objects and their relationships, and Trusted Automated Exchange of Indicator Information, TAXII, is a common way of transporting that intelligence between systems. You do not need to memorize every detail of these standards to understand their value, but you do need to understand what they enable. They allow intelligence producers to define things like indicators, threat actors, campaigns, malware, and observe data in a consistent set of object types. They also allow relationships to be expressed, such as an indicator being associated with a particular malware capability or an observed event being linked to a campaign. Transport mechanisms then allow organizations to share these objects through defined channels in a controlled way. The practical impact is that intelligence can be ingested into tools, correlated with local telemetry, and updated over time with version control rather than being copied manually. That is why these standards travel well across organizations. Standards also matter because intelligence is not static, An exchange needs to support updates, deprecations, and corrections. An indicator that is useful today may become irrelevant tomorrow, and a campaign assessment may change as new signals emerge. If intelligence is exchanged in static documents, recipients may keep acting on outdated information because there is no clear update path. Standards that travel support versioning, allowing intelligence objects to be updated, revoked, or marked as no longer valid. This helps recipients maintain a clean, current view rather than a growing pile of stale artifacts. It also supports auditability because you can trace what was shared and when it was changed. For defenders, this reduces noise because stale indicators are removed and focus stays on current behavior patterns. The result is not only better automation but better trust, because recipients learn that shared intelligence is maintained rather than abandoned. Another major advantage of structured standards is that they allow relationships to be expressed, and relationships are often what turn indicators into understanding. An isolated indicator can be blocked, but it does not explain why it matters or how it fits into an intrusion. When you can express that an indicator is part of infrastructure used by a campaign and that the campaign is associated with certain techniques, you give the recipient a richer picture. That picture can drive hunting, detection engineering, and scoping, not just blocking. Relationship-aware intelligence also helps prevent misinterpretation because recipients can see that a domain is not simply bad forever, but is part of a set of observations with a time window and a confidence level. This is particularly important because infrastructure and artifacts can be reused or compromised, so context matters. Standards that can represent relationships allow you to share not only what you saw, but how you understand it and how confident you are. This is how exchange moves from raw data to usable intelligence. However, standards can also create a false sense of certainty if they are used mechanically, and beginners should be aware of that risk. A structured object can look authoritative simply because it is structured, but structure does not guarantee accuracy. If you put weak evidence into a well-formed format, you still have weak evidence, and recipients may overtrust it because the format looks official. This is why standards that travel must still include confidence and source context, and why producers should resist the temptation to overclaim. It is also why consumers should treat structured intelligence as inputs to validation rather than as unquestioned truth. A good exchange culture includes both the technical ability to share structured data and the analytical discipline to calibrate confidence responsibly. Standards help prevent accidental distortion, but they do not prevent analytical errors. Understanding this keeps you from treating standards as a substitute for critical thinking. Another practical trade-off is that different recipients may need different levels of detail, and standards must be used in a way that does not overshare or undershare. A partner might need a set of indicators and behavior descriptions, but not internal victim details that could reveal sensitive information. A detection platform might benefit from structured indicators and technique mapping, but not long narrative context. A leadership audience might need a decision summary and handling restrictions rather than raw objects. Standards can support these differences by allowing selective sharing of relevant objects while omitting sensitive ones, and by attaching handling labels and confidence information. The goal is to share enough to be useful without sharing so much that you create risk. This is where trusted, auditable processes connect directly to standards, because standards provide the structure, but processes provide the governance. When both are aligned, exchange becomes both scalable and safe. Standards that travel also support automation, which is one of the main reasons they exist, but automation should be treated carefully in intelligence work. Automated ingestion can help defenders respond quickly, such as by flagging events that match known indicators or by enriching alerts with context about related campaigns. Automation can also help maintain consistency because it reduces manual copying and pasting, which introduces errors. The risk is that automated action based on intelligence can cause harm if the intelligence is low confidence or stale. This is why confidence and handling context are essential, and why organizations often separate automated enrichment from automated blocking. A common safe approach is to automate the flow of information into visibility and correlation, while keeping destructive actions like blocks and isolation tied to human review or to higher confidence conditions. Standards make automation possible, but good governance makes automation safe. When you understand this, you can appreciate why exchange standards include fields for confidence, timestamps, and relationships. It also helps to see how standards support internal consistency, not only external sharing. Within an organization, different teams may produce and consume intelligence differently, and standards can reduce friction by creating a shared internal language. If the threat intel team publishes structured objects, the detection team can ingest them without manual translation, and the response team can reference them with consistent identifiers and versioning. This reduces the risk that a campaign is described differently across teams, creating confusion during incidents. It also supports auditable processes because internal sharing is recorded and versioned, not scattered across informal messages. Internal use of standards can be an intermediate step before external sharing, allowing the organization to build discipline and reliability. Over time, this improves the quality of intelligence because structured representation forces clarity about what is being asserted and how pieces relate. That clarity makes both production and consumption more mature. As we wrap up, exchanging intelligence using standards that travel is about making intelligence portable, interoperable, and less prone to distortion as it moves between systems and organizations. Standards help represent different kinds of intelligence, from indicators to behavioral patterns to context like confidence and handling restrictions, in a consistent structure that tools can ingest and humans can interpret. Formats like STIX and transport methods like TAXII enable structured sharing with relationships, versioning, and controlled distribution, while handling conventions help maintain trust boundaries. The value is not only speed and automation, but also clarity, because standards reduce ambiguity and preserve meaning across recipients. The risks are that structure can be over-trusted and automation can be misused, which is why confidence calibration and governance remain essential. When you combine standards with trusted, auditable processes, intelligence can travel farther and work harder, turning individual observations into shared defensive advantage without sacrificing safety or credibility.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.